Today, I've got the pleasure of having Alex Lopez join us in a few minutes for an informational interview. Alex's background is in banking. He's worked for as a national bank examiner and also as an internal auditor at both the federal level and the county government level, in addition to the fact that he's worked for some private community banks. And today, he works for Crowe, which is a public accounting firm, and he's in their consulting division, providing very similar services to what he was doing as an auditor in the past, but to his clients today. So Alex, thanks for coming on board.
Hi, Cole. Thanks for having me.
So Alex, we're all curious about your career path and how you arrived where you're at today, which is a public accounting firm. Most people go to public accounting first and then private industry, but you've done your private experience, some government experience as well, and today you're in public accounting. We're curious, what did that career path look like for you?
Oh man, that's tough. So I guess briefly, I started in government and then went to private and then now public accounting, which is I think maybe unconventional. Most people start in public accounting, because they're notoriously known for providing just a lot of value, get a lot of clients. You put in a lot of hours, you put in your time, and then, most people feel like, you put in the 80-hour weeks for so long, you grow, you learn a lot of things, and then you're able to jump into private or even government where you work maybe usually less hours. And I will say that it's pretty difficult to go the route that I went. But that's where I started. So I started in the federal government with an agency called the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And they are a branch of the Department of the Treasury for the federal government. And so what they do is regulate banks. So, all the banks that you kind of know of, the big ones, Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America, they regulate those banks and essentially make the rules for the banking system. They ensure safety and soundness. And so I worked there as a national bank examiner, as an assistant national bank examiner. Basically, once you do that for 3 or 4 years, then you typically get, certified. You become what they call a national bank examiner, where much like a CPA, you're able to sign off on reports. So you can kind of think of it that way. Before you get your CPA, you can't sign off on financial statements, and much the same way in that field. So started there, worked there briefly. Then from there, I jumped into local government. I worked as an internal auditor for Riverside County, and that's pretty straightforward. Internal audit, did mostly operational, not really financial. So that was my primary focus there. I worked there for a few years, and then jumped into an institution called. I jumped back into banking after that. So I jumped into Providence Savings Bank here in Riverside County as well. They're a small community bank, about $1 billion in asset size, and worked there for a while. Did that for a little bit, and then from there jumped onto here at Crowe as a senior consultant. So a lot of the work I would say is very similar to internal audit, except I think that at least here we get a lot of different types of exposure. So we don't just do maybe operational type of work. We might also do consultative work. So if a bank wants to implement for instance, maybe credit cards, maybe they're a small bank that doesn't offer a credit card product, they could essentially contact us, and we would help them set up the systems that they would need from an operational standpoint, at least my particular position, right? And then IT could help set up that side. So that's sort of where I'm at now.
How did you get your start in accounting and auditing? Did you go straight from college into a role that was doing audit work? What did that look like?
So right after college, I jumped into sales. So I did sales for not very long. I knew I wanted to be in the banking industry. So right out of college, I moved from the Bay Area down to Southern California, where I'm originally from. And so, most students, at least most of my cohort, had jobs coming out of college. in their respective field. I ended up jumping into sales, did that for a few months, and then when I found my opportunity to start as a teller for Bank of America specifically, I jumped into that. And so, teller position is very, cash handling, managing customers, and things like that. But a big component that I think people don't realize, especially to promote, is sales. Opening new accounts, offering new accounts, and helping customers, open those along with, the bankers. So that's where I really got my start in banking, was at Bank of America as a teller. I did that very briefly, only about 2.5 months before I was extended an offer with the OCC, which was the first federal government position I held after college. That was my first, you can say, quote unquote, professional job that I had out of college. And that's kind of how I got my start.
So for those of us considering a career path similar to yours, what would you say have been the keys to advancing through that career path as you have?
The biggest component in audit for me has been communication skills. And especially out of college, most any professional position, if you're starting, it doesn't matter if you're starting off in tax, or if you're starting off in audit or federal government, in the case where I did, they understand that you have maybe just a base load knowledge, or you only understand the lingo that you might learn on, that you might be subject to, in the position that you're working for. They understand that, where I started specifically, right, that they didn't know that you don't necessarily understand banking, or that you don't understand the inner workings of a bank. But they would expect you to know basic terminology, right? What a checking account is or something like that. And now they don't ask those specific questions, but I think if you understand very basic lingo and you have just really good communication skills, that is very important. The technical skills, I feel like, come in once you begin advancing in your career and you're looking for that next promotion. That's where the technical knowledge is really going to come in. But when you're first getting your start, being able to convey your ideas, in an interview, or answer questions without, mumbling, or looking away too much, or looking at the floor. They need to know that you have, good communication skills, both written and verbal. So I would say that even as I advance through my career, I find that is of extreme importance. Written and verbal communication skills, I would say, are top of the list.
It's great that you bring up communication, because it's such an important skill for almost any accounting and finance career. What has been your secret sauce to building your communication skills? Because many of us struggle with it, me included. I'm naturally an introvert. I was very shy. I wouldn't even make eye contact with people in my younger days. It's a skill that I've had to build and develop. How have you done that? Have you hired mentors? Is it just through practice, self-guided study? What's been your secret sauce? And let's not make it secret anymore.
It's like, I don't give up the secrets. No. For me, I have had, I would say I've had more of a natural ability to speak to people. However, that doesn't mean that you're always able to convey your ideas, right? So some people, for instance, for me, when I first began, I was very good at, eye-to-eye contact with the folks that were interviewing me. I was, good in terms of speaking, but when it came to, kind of laying out my ideas and kind of who I was, right? And that's kind of what you're doing in an interview. Who are you? I found that I would mumble or stumble a lot. So I did need that practice. And for me, a lot of it came on the job. So as an auditor, you're not only looking at, it doesn't even matter what type of audit you're doing. You're not only looking at numbers all day. You're not only looking at operations. You have to communicate a lot with your client. And I think that's been kind of a hit or miss, go throughout the years, because as an auditor, you know what you're looking for. you understand, the way you're asking your questions and what type of answer that you're looking for to ensure that they're doing what they should be doing, right? And now, but most of the people that you're communicating with do not understand why, if you're looking for, let's say you're looking for accounts payable statements, right? And you want to make sure that every check was signed and that, every check has, that there's a register and that was signed off on and that somebody looked at it and they made sure that there was no check number skipped. The client may not understand why they would need to sign and date that, right? For audit purposes. They might feel like, as long as I look at it and there's nothing wrong with it, then why would I need to do that, right? So I think that it's important to, especially in this field, to really be able to look at things from the client standpoint and sometimes even formulate questions that they would understand, because they might not know what you're looking for. So I think that for me, it's mostly been, I've had the great fortune of being thrown into the lion's den, especially at the OCC when I started. I was kind of forced to learn those skills. A lot of the folks that we were interviewing to gain information from were, because they were community banks, we had access to the CFO, the controllers, the CEO of smaller, under $1 billion banks. Most of the time, those banks have very tight-knit teams, and these C-suite folks are overlooking everything. And so, sometimes they had 20, 30, 40 years on the job, and so you're really forced to be able to communicate your ideas, and especially if you have an issue, you're not always going to get an okay, that makes sense. Sometimes it's no, but we have this, or did you consider this, right? So I think that that's been instrumental for me in learning those skills.
I think of a lot of stereotypes when I think of government jobs, and also when I think of public accounting jobs, from government being very heavy bureaucracy to public accounting being super fast paced, quick. You're just consumed with your work most of the time. The busy seasons are insane. What would you say give us a pros and cons list of both your experience working in government and in a public accounting firm? Give it to us raw.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, get ready. I would say definitely government. One of the biggest things is that some people might like it, some might not. I consider it a con, because I like to be creative and share ideas. I would say that bureaucratic, and I think you're going to hear that in a lot of places. That can be good or bad. Some people like things by the book. They like, if they have an idea, the chain of command, they appreciate that, right? That type of structure. For me, I think that's hard. It's a pretty difficult situation to be in, because sometimes you feel, you want to stick to a certain plan, and sometimes you feel like, if I have to take this to my manager, who then might have to take it to another level up, and having that chain of command, you might feel like there's a lot of time wasted in that. And that was the case for me, that I felt in government. I would say the biggest con for me personally. And I would say with it being so bureaucratic, there's very little opportunity for you to really, how would I put it? Not necessarily share your ideas or have a creative way of problem solving. I feel that sometimes, because it's so bureaucratic, that those ideas aren't as appreciated. Because it's like, this is how we do things. The report looks like this. This is how we contact the client, and if you have an issue here, it needs to go to this person, and then this person, if it's above their pay grade, so to speak, somebody else has to approve that, right? And so sometimes the turnaround time for something might take too long. You might forget, the details and stuff like that. So, I personally prefer a faster pace. So I would say that that's the con, that if you have an idea, most of the time it won't even be considered, right? And sometimes some of the things that you hear, maybe not from a lot of folks, but some folks, and because I like, new ideas and moving things forward and being more futuristic, using better technology, I would say that that's another con. that sometimes you might be working with systems that are too old. And especially if you're, if you work for a private company like a bank, or even a CPA firm, they tend to have the latest technology. So that could be frustrating for some. And even if you don't work public accounting or a private company, you only work government, that might be, that could be another hindrance in your ability to grow, is you're not using all the latest technology, you're using stuff that's dated. And sometimes when, because it's so bureaucratic, even when systems do change, they take a long time. So I would say those are cons, overly bureaucratic, and that kind of cascades into other things, right? And the inability to really have your creative ideas, at the forefront, because of typically there's that chain of command, and because systems tend to be dated, creativeness isn't always rewarded. So I think those are the most frustrating. The plus, the positive things about government, I would say the biggest thing is the hours. If you're private or even public accounting, you don't tend to have the end of the month. If you're an accountant, right, you don't have the end of the month where, that week you're slammed. Maybe that week you might work 60, 70 hours. There typically isn't a busy season per se. I mean, it does depend on the position, but, for me personally, that wasn't a problem. 40 hours a week. The schedules tend to be great. I worked what they call a 980 schedule. So I had every other Friday off. So that would be 9 hours Monday through Thursday, every Monday through Thursday, and then 8 hours on Friday, and then with every other Friday off. So I feel like you have more flexibility. More often than not, they also call it the 4-10 schedule, right? 10 hours, 4 days a week, with every Friday off. You see those schedules a lot more often in government. And so when it comes to time off, and kind of along those lines, I would say that most of the time you could actually unplug from work. I would say that that's the best. So if you're off most of the time, depending on your position, of course, and where you are in government, for the most part, you're able to take the days you want off, right? If you have the time accrued, you can take the time off. You get to work a better schedule. And when you're off, you can actually be off. You don't have to be thinking about, going into the office, checking emails and things like that. And I would say those are the best. I would say those are the best aspects of government, especially if you have a family, right? Where you usually have that, where you could have that flexibility of, that schedule to attend, things for your kids, taking the time off, going on vacation and things like that. But I do think that it depends on the firm, in terms of it being better in government versus a public company. But I would say those are the more positive aspects of government. And the last thing that I would say about government, especially if you're in local government, it may not be the case in federal government, but at least for us it was. So in internal audit, we specifically, we would audit every department within the county. So it was always great to have, get exposure to every department, and also learning people's names, getting to know them. They get to know the kind of work that you do. And so in local government, especially for us in internal audit specifically, we had such a high level view of the county. Any department would get to know you. So because we audit everybody, all of the management would get to know who you are. And so I think that in terms of like moving up, getting more money, getting a better position, I think that with the county, there was a really good opportunity, because if you did good work, everybody in other departments would know about it, right? So at least that was the case for us. So for us, when I worked Riverside County, I know that a lot of people in our department would move on to the executive office, which, the people who kind of manage the county itself, right? So the CEO of the county, right? The county, the financial manager of the county, the CFO, like they are in that department. And so, you know, that was the go-to department, and they would hire a lot from our specific department, as management analysts, and those positions tend to pay really well, and they tend to be really good positions within accounting, where you get to oversee a department. And so I like that aspect of it, that type of mobility where if you didn't want to be an internal audit because you knew so much about the county, you could jump into something completely different, which isn't always the case in private or public companies. You kind of have to stay in that, so if you're in accounting or audit, the positions that you might be able to take are more finance or accounting based, right? Whether it be a financial analyst or a controller, those types of positions. Whereas at least with accounting, because you learn the operations of everything, you're able to jump into positions that have nothing to do with accounting. And so I would say that was a really good aspect of being in government.
A lot of us are really familiar with audit and tax when it comes to public accounting career options, but you're not doing either. You're in the consulting wing. Can you share with us a little bit about, what does a day look like for you in your department? And also, is there a busy season to it like there is with audit and tax?
So it depends. And I know everybody hates that answer. So we do have a quote unquote busy season that tends to be early spring to late summer. So, right now we're kind of in the thick of it, and it kind of slows down towards the end of the year, right? The nice thing is that because we're not subject to, we're not auditing financials, and we're not doing tax work. We're not subject to those, April or September, October deadlines, to where you might be maybe after April you might be slowing down and you might be okay during the summer, and then you get slammed in August where you're working 80-90 hour weeks. I have found that for us it's pretty stable. I would say it's the slowest, between starting the holiday season. So once you start getting into November, things start slowing down. If you think about banking hours, we tend to have more holidays in that time frame. So because I work for financial services, we kind of tend to follow the banking schedule a little bit. Now a lot of things have changed in terms of time off and things like that. And so, for instance, now here at Crowe specifically, we get the week between Christmas and New Year's off, and we get the 4th of July week off. And then there's flexibility, and I think that's great for us. So sometimes, for instance, if there's I believe President's Day we were off, and so let's say, for instance, that's a Crowe holiday, or if it's a banking holiday, we have that day off. If you're maybe slammed with a customer, or we still have deadlines. So if you're slammed with a customer and you have to work on that day, you're able to book your time and your hours for that day, but you have that free floating holiday that you can use at a different time, where in most places that I've heard, that doesn't really exist. That's that's quote unquote your day off, but if you have to work, right, because a client needs something, then you just kind of lost a holiday, right, in most places. But for us, we're able to take that time off. And so yeah, I would say I enjoy that aspect of it.
Okay.
And so, but those are the times that we're kind of, slower, I guess you could say. Not as much to do, but we're kind of in the thick of it right now.
What are some of the biggest challenges and problems that you're solving in your current role today for some of your clients?
So I would say right now the biggest challenge, especially in financial services, has been the most obvious has been with the whole COVID and the new laws that were put into place. People's loans going on forbearance and stuff like that. I think that helping banks manage that process, because it's so ambiguous, or at least it was at the beginning, right? The government basically said, loan holiday, nobody has to pay their loans. If your loan qualifies for forbearance, then we're going to do that for you, right? And so the biggest challenge was helping banks get up to speed and kind of guiding them in a way that they wouldn't have to completely reverse course at some point, right? So I would say that was the biggest challenge, getting all these folks started, being at the forefront of all the changing laws, and anytime they would change a word, we had to be on top of it, and ensuring that they're following the guidance, as the SBA would put it out there. So, and I would say that the key to really managing that is just having really good time management. And I know that may sound weird, but the technical stuff, when things change that fast, you'll learn them. But I think the biggest part is being able to manage yourself and your time, and just kind of managing even your own expectations of an ambiguous time, and I think that for us, that was a real time to shine, especially to managers, right? Being able to manage that process and really share your ideas, or get creative and share that with the rest of the team. But I would say it's that. I think it's remaining calm and just good time management, when things are really ambiguous, and just kind of learning as you go, I think are important. But I think that having just a kind of a good mindset and not getting bogged down with all the details.
Alex, do you think there's a personality type that's best suited to the line of work that you're doing now?
Ooh, maybe not I think that maybe not a personality type per se, but because I think that introverts and extroverts can succeed in this field, but I think that really what it takes is just a willingness to learn. If you're the kind of individual that wants to continue learning and doing new things, this is a very dynamic field. Internal audit is ever changing, and I would say that that's probably the most important factor is really the willingness to learn. I would say that you can find something for you if you're extroverted and you like being in groups and talking to people. I think this is a great field, and I think specifically, at least here for us, a lot of folks really respect. They kind of get a gauge of your personality type, whether you're more extroverted and like working in groups, or you're more introverted and you don't want to be bothered, you like working one-on-one, or you like having something, staying busy to yourself. I think that anybody can find something that they like in this specific field. But I think that the most important thing, because it's always changing, and even a lot of kind of what's going on now with the advancement of robotics and AI, there's a lot of stuff that's becoming automated, so even in our field. So I would say that the willingness to learn and always trying to maintain that creativity are, I would say, the most important factors for this field.
And there you have it, a brief informational interview with Alex Lopez. If you're considering a career path or your career planning that involves banking, government, or even public accounting, internal audit type work, Alex is a great resource. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. You can also connect with him on our Hire a Mentor program. If you're looking for someone to provide you some guidance with your career plan, skill building, or you just need a sounding board to ask some questions.